Good afternoon and happy Wednesday. Welcome to Zera Today. I am your humble host, Pastor Lorenzo Neal, hailing from Cajun Land, USA, here to present you with seasons of wisdom, insight, inspiration, liberation, empowerment, promoting a knowledge that is engaging and transforming. And as you can hear, I got somebody with me this morning, this afternoon. I'm babysitting. I'm having fun. We're promoting a knowledge that is engaging and transforming, and we're here to empower you, our listeners, to knowing and impacting the world around you. And as always, you're welcome to join us on this illuminating journey. Several ways to do that. We got a chat room that's open, so you can go to the chat room. The link is there on my Facebook page. Also, you can follow us on Twitter. My handle is Lorenzo T. Neal. Show handle at Zera Radio. So check us out on both of those. Also follow us on the Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, and Zera Network Facebook page. We're on there, so you can join us on there too. Also, and where else? Wherever else we're here. You can send me a personal message, Pastor Lorenzo Neal at gmail.com. I'm babysitting today. I got one of the little church members here with me, hanging with me today. And come here. Yeah. It's little Jackson, little dude. He's watching Curious George and eating French fries while I'm gonna try to make it through this broadcast uninterrupted. I don't know how well I will do. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching the live stream. Thank you for supporting me. And you can follow the show at Zera Radio on Twitter. You can follow blogtalkradio.com/Zera Today. You can go there and see archive shows available in any old podcast, iTunes, all of that. You can catch archive shows. Anyway, got a lot to talk about today. And like I said, I have a guest here, and hopefully I can get some things done. But if not, I'll be all right. You just tune in as best as you can, as long as you can. Oh, boy, this is going to be fun. He's keeping me entertained. So today I want to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. It's the 5th anniversary officially today of Black Lives Matter. The movement began in the summer of 2013, and I want to talk about some of those things that have developed, some of the things that have developed since then, but I also want to talk about a couple of the topics that have crossed my desk this week, church related and non-church related. If I can stay focused. I only think I took my Adderall this morning. But there's a lot of stuff. I mean, start off with a headline. There was a church in Indiana, and I came across this again by way of the Old Black Church website, blog site. Sister Ann Brock, who is the facilitator for that page, brought up this story about a church in Indiana that had a sign, and the sign read, LGBTQ is a hate crime against God. Repent. And I looked at it, and according to the story, they were, the church was evicted from their space that they were renting and holding services. And I don't know what the qualifier was for their tendency there. I don't know what they had to do to maintain it, but apparently whoever owns or leases property or building to them thought that the message was offensive. Lord have mercy. Thought that the message was offensive, and so kicked them out of that meeting space. No, not yay. This little guy has already got me excited. So, yes, boo. Thank you. So they were pulled out of their meeting space because of the sign that says homosexuality is basically a hate crime against God. Now, I don't know a lot of preachers, a lot of people quote scripture saying God hates homosexuality. God hates a lot of things apparently, and yet He's love at the same time. It's somewhat confusing. I don't know. Either He loves all the time or hates all the time. But either way, the reality is the fact that we've got it all kind of messed up. We forget humanity. We forget that we're humanity and we're humans first, and um, whether we're repressed sexually or whatever it may be. And people are going to say we're casting judgment. I don't think the sign was tactful, but I wouldn't put that on my side. I definitely would not put that on my side. But I would say, God loves those persons who are same-sex attracted. Whether He prefers them to be that way, I cannot say because, I don't know. I like to say I know the heart and mind of God, but I question my own mind and heart at times. So my motives in saying things and interacting with people are sometimes not always the best motives. So anyway, what they say, who are me to judge? But there's several stories from the old black church that caught my interest. So if you ever get a chance to go by that blog site, the old black church, you'll find some interesting articles. Another one that came up is about Marvin Winans, and I only thought this was I got a superhero in the church. Marvin Winans, if you're not familiar with him, of course he's a gospel singer, but aside from being a gospel singer, um, his name recently came back up a couple of weeks ago. If you with the Leandria Johnson calling him out and saying whatever she said about him. Marvin Winans is a bishop. I don't know if he's a bishop of his own little fellowship or just a bishop at his local church that have other people under him. I don't know, but he's a bishop, and the last 10 years or so, he's been having a campaign to build a multi-million-dollar edifice, and you could go there, and this is no secret. The rendering for the building was pretty nice, pretty big. But the problem is where it's located in Detroit. Some would say it's located in the area of Detroit that is still not in full recovery. There's a lot of poverty, and he wants to build this multi-million-dollar. Oh goodness, is he? Oh Lord, this is gonna be a tough one. I don't know if y'all can hear all that noise. Can y'all hear all that noise that he's doing? Can you see all that what he's doing? Look at it. Say hi. Hi. Little adorable little dude. Yeah, 3 years old. I had my dog Jackson was in here, and when those two are together, it's something else. Say hi.
Hi.
I hope his mother is watching. I'm doing a good job babysitting. Anyway, so Marvin Winans is the reason he's making the blog talk or church gossip circle or whatever you want to call it is because he's trying to again renew the vision to build this building, this edifice. Now it's a multi-million-dollar edifice and supposedly will be able to seat about 5,000 persons. I don't know the numbers of folk in his ministry membership. Neither do I know, but perhaps he was looking to use it for other means, conferences or revivals or concerts, live recordings, whatever it may be. You having fun? So whatever it may be. I tell you, I just don't know what's going on in here. So he's drawing fire for the controversy. Why is he still trying to build after all these years? I think they do have a building, but he wants to build. He says the Lord has commanded him to build this building, and I have issue with that. But that's neither here nor there. I can't dispute what God said for him to do. The only thing I can do is just hope that people are wise enough to know that maybe 5,000 may be too many. Maybe you can settle for maybe a auditorium that'll seat 1,000. I mean, I'm just saying, if because you got to think, if you do build this building and he wants to build it, I'm sure he wants to build it without debt, like what many ministers claim to do when they build new edifices. They want to do it debt free. They don't want to rely. I don't touch that. They don't want to rely on banking and funding. They just want it to come straight from the tithes, the offering, the building fund. And y'all know, if y'all been in church long enough, you've been in churches. They've been having the building fund for the last 30 years. Hey, got nothing done. Plenty of money in the building fund. And I was at a church one time. The pastor had a vision for the building, and they had been raising money, and they had nearly $40 million in a building account. And I'm not exaggerating. They had that much money in the building account. And guess what? The preacher died, and they still didn't build, and the money's still just sitting there. And then there's a case of post-Katrina. A lot of churches, there was one bishop in New Orleans who basically, he got swindled and the people got swindled from building. And it is what it is. Somebody's knocking at the door. Let me take a quick break and see who's knocking at my door. Be right back. Boy. Y'all excuse the break. Sorry about that. All right. Lost my whole entire train of thought. I don't know what I'm doing, what I'm talking about. But now I have two Jacksons in here. A 3-year-old and a 6-year-old dog. So y'all just, I don't know how this is going to go at all. Anyway. Let's see. This is crazy. So let me try to ease the tide here between these two rascals and try to stay on task on what I'm doing. Live radio. Boy, I tell you, it's funny. There's several other studies I want to talk about, but I digress. Today is the 100th birthday of Nelson Mandela. And we're all familiar with Nelson Mandela. If you're not familiar with him, you get familiar with him, but recently passed. And yesterday they had a Nelson Mandela lecture series in South Africa, and former President Barack Obama was one of the guest lecturers. He provided some interesting sound bites for media, but basically he spoke about regimes, dictatorships, and providing people with the emphasis for self-governance, and warning against the high probability of a totalitarian type of government that is coming and sweeping across countries in Europe, and seems to be that is not the case, but it does seem to be the case here in the States. That is attempt, as some would try to say, that Trump is trying to shift toward a totalitarian um, style of leadership. He's admiring persons like Putin and the president of North Korea, president of China, and most recently the president of Turkey. And all those countries, if you're not familiar, have basically one person rule. In case of China, the president is just the people just voted to have him president basically for life and basically gave him the powers of a dictator. But they're communists, and all of these countries that he admires are rooted in a communist perspective, not necessarily a socialist perspective. Except with the exception of Russia, still has a uh, somewhat of a socialist perspective, but they very much rooted in the communist idea. And you have Korea is just its own thing. Yes, it's communist, but who knows what they really think? I don't know. I'm just saying. But we see not, and this is a reflection also at the church state. You're seeing more preachers try to have that same type of authoritarian leadership um, within their churches. They're the sole authority, and by being the sole authority, no one could contradict them, and so they reign and rule over people. And while the ministries may grow, and while the numbers may grow, population wise, demographic wise may grow, uh, what comes with that? Hey, y'all gotta cut it out. Cut it out. What comes with that is this sense of um, narcissism, this sense of entitlement, this sense of everything else that comes with that. But we're seeing it. You observe it in a lot of churches, and it is damaging because, as I reflect again on the thing with Leandria Johnson and many others, what they're calling church hurt is actually a reflection of poor interpersonal skills with church leadership, where church leadership are unwilling to be authentic, transparent, and relational in their leadership. They may say they're servant leaders, but they're really functioning like hirelings, and that's it's troubling the church. And like I say, it's not just it transcends the political realm. We see this in spiritual realm, but Mandela, for all that he did post prison, we see and recognize that his legacy, for the most part, is while he had communist leanings himself and while he had socialist leanings himself as president, uh, we see the humanity that he had towards the love for humanity, and I think that's the thing that we should remember him as. He loved humanity, um, and he presented that in a way that transcended culture, race, and political affiliation. Either way. Hey, mommy, sis Womack. Uh, Shout out to you. So those one of the things. So I'm kind of rambling because I lost track. I had the script and lost track thanks to my little visitors here. But anyway, so uh, Marvin Winans. Back to this Marvin Winans thing, and then I'm gonna take a break and um, I just personally, this is just me. I would give up. And I tell you what, I would give up. I wouldn't give up on the vision. I believe God would still probably say that we could do it if it's there. But you know, um, if it's not there now, you wait. You write the vision, you make it plain. Though it tarry, wait for it, and it will come to pass. That's what Scripture says. And I think in our desire to do more and want to be more, especially in the church, in the Black church in particular. Not so much as in um, other counterparts. We have this need to want to exploit at God's expense, and I think That's a dangerous thing when we start doing that, because membership ain't guaranteed for membership in most churches is seasonal. You get mad, you say something wrong, and people leave your church. You do something wrong, people will leave your church. You get caught up in a scandal, people leave your church, and you'll suffer. But if you build something that's centered around the God of grace and the Christ of our redemption, you have people rallying for that cause and not for a building, not for ministry, and definitely not for personality. But that's just me. Maybe I'm just hating. I don't know. Uh, Let me take a quick break and I got to get my thoughts together and get these guys calmed down. They quiet for now. But y'all can't hear their music anyway, so. And the chat room is open, so you can go to the chat room. I did put a link there on my page, so if you want to share some thoughts, you can make comments on the live thing. So yeah, this is still kind of new to me, but it's worth it. So 5 years, Black Lives Matter. 5 years ago, a group of persons began after the acquittal of George Zimmerman, started a hashtag or the phrase Black Lives Matter on social media, and three young ladies collaborated to put this hashtag together on the Twitter, Instagram and all that, Black Lives Matter. Now, part of it was heightened. The bulk of it really came during the summers of 14 and 15 and 16, where you saw what seemed to be an abhorrent number of unarmed people of color being assailed by police, killed by police. Think about Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, whose daughter led the movement there in the New York area, she's now passed away, but she was one of the premier faces of the Black Lives movement in the New York area. And I could go down the line within the pantheon of what some would deem as martyrs within um, Black Lives Matter movement. And I first, particularly with Michael Brown, this was the most controversial. Um, the narrative was that Michael Brown um, walked with his hands up and said, "Don't shoot," and yet the officer shot and killed him. Of course, we know that narrative turned out to be incorrect. We know, what he had done prior to his encounter with the officer. We know what type of physical encounter he had with the officer that led to uh, ultimately to his death. And yet, in Ferguson, the rioting that happened following that event only uncovered layers of uh, malfeasance and mistreatment in that particular community, and also uncovered a whole lot of the fact that the council and the police department were largely uh, non-people of color, and the community were people of color. The fact that they were ravaging their own neighborhoods and their own stores. And then you hear after the shooting of another person in what was it, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, I believe, I can't remember, where his sister got out and the media portrayed her as this purveyor of peace and not to loot and do all this, but be people of peace. But when you look at the full clip, they were saying, she was giving a call to action not to do it in their neighborhoods, but to do it in everybody else's neighborhood. What up, Darius? Uh, I don't know what it do, but whatever it's doing is doing. You need to come back here. You need to come back to Mississippi, man. I ain't got nothing to do. I ain't got nobody to get in trouble with. Um, anyway, um, so the narratives that led to the the development of the Black Lives Matter movement were somewhat skewed, I guess you can say, but the underlying premise was to promote this sense that crimes against people of color, black people in particular, seemed to be nonchalant, taken with a nonchalant attitude, particularly in our own communities. We would have black on black crime, and we would, we don't snitch. Um, we have many unsolved homicides and in our community, and that includes my own nephew. Um, his homicide is still unsolved. You know, and that goes on across the country in neighborhoods, and we seem to have some type of silence when it's us, but when it's not us, we can raise our voice. And whether and that, people can say what they want to say about that it is what it is. But the reality of the matter is that we must recognize that um, there is a big discrepancy, and and we've seen it even more recently with nonviolent crimes. With nonviolent crimes, by that you think about the students the people who are getting called police on because they're black. The two young men in Philadelphia sitting in Starbucks, and the police are called on them. The student at Yale in her dorm room studying, and someone called the police because they didn't believe she should be there. The young black man going to his apartment in New York City, and police called on him because someone believed that he didn't belong there. Think about the people having a picnic and someone called the police. More recently, someone at the swimming pool calling the police. And so these are non-violent acts that seem to imply again that black lives don't matter by way of the actions of non-people of color. These actions say that because this person is black, we have the right to assume that if they're in some place that we think they should not be, then we have the right to call the police on them, and that's how it comes across. So I think there's a new phase of this and a new shift. Now, let me put this disclaimer out there. The Black Lives Movement has become a very organized, well-funded, well-structured organization. So you have to differentiate the Black Lives Movement from the Black Lives Matter call. You don't have to be a part of the movement to say that Black Lives Matter, and you don't have to be black to say Black Lives Matter. And I applaud all those persons, non-persons of color, the white people, Asian people, all those who have become allies in this movement. And I've seen a lot of pictures, memes, and videos regarding that. But historically, we see where black lives have not really mattered, and we can talk about that honestly. And I'm not just talking about in slavery either. I'm not just talking about pre-civil rights either. I'm talking about just within the last my 40 years of life. Within my 40 years of life, historically, we can see where black lives were considered less of an issue to other, and we see it. You could talk about the systemic prison population that's more black than anything else. particularly here in the South and Louisiana and Mississippi. You could talk about um, the education system, where in urban areas the the education is poor than in more populous or more wealthy areas. And matter of fact, I was just at a meeting with the Jackson Public School discussing some of these things, and someone brought up the issue that there's a private school here in the city that's very is well funded. It's in a wonderful part of the city. Um, Jackson Academy is his name, and how the persons who support that school, is a private school, so that means it doesn't. As far as I know, it doesn't get any type of state funding. It may, I may not, I may be out of loop on that. Um, and that those persons, those parents paying the tuition to attend for their children to attend that school, are the same parents who are being fed negative information about funding public schools. And for some reason they will support and they will fund their private school, and with the same in the same way speak out against funding public schools, largely because in their minds, in the way some of the legislatures have formed it, have placed this narrative, is that public schools are failing, and public schools are failing because of, basically the population is largely people of color, and people of color don't really want to be educated. They don't really want to be educated because they want to live off the government, and they want to live off the government because the government gives them food stamps, the government gives them welfare, the government gives them Section 8 housing, the government gives them all of this. And so they are less likely to perform well in school because they know whether they perform bad, poor, or bad, they have something to fall back on. And that's a terrible narrative that's being put forth, not just here in Mississippi, but across the country in many big cities and urban areas. Where, you know, that's the same. It's the same narrative. The narrative goes that they don't really want to do anything, so we shouldn't really fund them. Or the second narrative is that the teachers are just there to get a paycheck, and many of them, because they did not go to school for education for something else, they're just selling, because again the government has created things like Teach America, so you could teach a couple of years, and the government will pay off your student loans, and then you can go and start your career, and you don't really have to care about the students. And those persons who will say that they are fiscal conservative and that they are uh, for limited government, and a limited government within the sphere of individual liberties, those persons will present that argument. Um, and again, it goes back to this whole concept that reality is that black lives don't matter to black people, because if black lives matter to black people, then black people would be more assertive, more aggressive in promoting agendas and adopting things that will be empowering and liberating for those communities that black people live in. And then there are those who would say there are those who would say that, well, they are on a democratic plantation and they voted against their best interests. And I'm address this. I identify as a conservative. At one time, I identified as a Republican. I know they got a ways to go to get me back there, but the reality is there's a Democratic platform plantation, there's a Republican plantation, and we just need to get off both of them and start thinking for ourselves. But here's the thing: when they say that blacks vote against their interests, their own interests, there's some truth to that, but again, think about how we've been conditioned to do so. And this again is the narrative. Well, this is where the Black Lives Matters movement comes in. I was glad when I saw them sparking interest in getting people registered to vote, young people registered to vote. Not only that, but I was also very glad to see people turning out to vote post 2012. And I was glad to see. I work the polls sometimes here in my local elections, and I just love to see young people coming out and voting in municipal and county elections when it's not a presidential election. That really is where we miss it. Uh, you know, large times when it's just a county or a city election or municipal election, you have low voter turnout. You're gonna have maybe 10 to 30% turnout to vote in a municipal election for city council, school board, or mayor. But when it's a presidential election, you'll have a greater number. But most people are not informed, not really educated about what's other than president. You know, for example, this midterm is probably pivotal now only because of the person we have serving as president. and, and there are those who are established who are trying to see him out. They want to get him out. And then there are those who hope to shift the demographics of our congressional delegations from red to blue. And so that's the motive for that. Chelsea, this is true. Negative fixed mindset. You're right. It is a negative fixed mindset. Thank you for that comment. So there's a lot working against us. Largely, it's self-inflicted, and it's self-inflicted. I say it's self-inflicted largely because we were conditioned post World War II to think a certain way, to vote a certain way, and those persons at one time were in our best interest. But everybody, and I'm speaking very generally, but we did have a large amount of our politicians, you know, become Uncle Tom. And when I say Uncle Tom, I'm not talking about, you know, I'm not talking about they were acting white. I'm talking about they sold out to the system. They became Uncle Toms, not that they were acting white or anything of that nature. They became Uncle Toms because they were no longer for a principle of liberation for our people. Dollars mean something. When you got to fund a campaign, you know, and those persons who are funding you say you stick to this message or you vote for this, we're gonna get you elected, but you're gonna have to vote this way. You have to make a choice. You're gonna make a choice whether you're gonna be this way or you're gonna stick to yourself and say, well, you can give me your money, but I'm still gonna vote my way. And those are the kind of politicians we're lacking largely in the black community. And when you put it within the full spectrum of the black community, beginning with the black church, well, again, I know some may say there's no such thing as black church or white church, and we all the church. No, they're very distinctive. They're very distinctive. Beginning in the black church, the leadership model in the black church in many cases where you have a male-dominated leadership, and yet you have females doing all the work, doing all the caring and work of the ministry. And that dynamic is reflected also in our educational system. You have a population dominated by female teachers, lacking male teachers, and in some cases, not all cases, but where most of the leadership in the district is male. And this dynamic has to change. The whole construct has to change from the church to education, and then again within the larger spectrum of the political system within the black community. Again, a large amount of elected officials are male and not females. And when you look at the broader spectrum of that at the federal level, now think about this. Think about this. We are 13 to 15% of the population, and we only reflect in congressional representation just about 3%. And I may be wrong on those figures. But uh, we don't represent a large portion of our population. I think maybe less than 1% of our we were elected officials, both at the local and well, not at the local. I'll just stick to the government, to the state and federal level. Reflect us. And think about this. Think about this. There are 100 senators, and of those 100 senators, only 3 are black. 2 are male. 1 is female. 2 are Democrats. And 1 is Republican. Okay. 1 is from the East. 1 is from the South, and 1 is from the West. Now, in that sense, that kind of does reflect a little bit. We don't have any representation as senators from the Midwest or the Southwest, for that matter. But we got it in the congressional district and representation in Congress. Now, of that congressional black caucus, all members, with the exception of Tim Scott, who is the senator from South Carolina. I don't believe he's a part of that caucus. He may be. I'm not sure. But all of them are members of the Democratic Party, and they do not have a significant leadership. Now, we do have leadership in the Democratic Party. I think the majority whip is, I could be mistaken, Elijah Cummings, I want to say he is. It may not be him. No, it's the guy from South Carolina. I'll think of it later. But we have significance. We don't have significant representation as needs to be across the spectrum, and we have to radically shift that. And we could do all the voter registrations we want to, and I strongly encourage that. But to really have the Black Lives Matter reflected in totality within the spectrum of our existence as people of color, as black people, that we gotta be more aggressive with it. We cannot just limit it to acts of aggression when it's police against a person of color, a black person. We can't. I mean, that's worthless in so many words, because we're going to see that more frequently than we see anything else. And like they're protesting right now in Chicago against the death of a black man, a barber living in Chicago, who was apparently well loved in his community, and he was killed by police officers. And they released a 40-second video of the shooting, body cam footage of the shooting, in which it was clear that he had a weapon, and that it looked like he was reaching for the weapon. Whether that's true or not, he was reaching towards his hip now, but he had a weapon, so he wasn't unarmed. But they're still saying there was an unnecessary death, and I agree. Any death by as a result of police interaction that can be preventable is unnecessary. My brother is a police officer in my hometown, and I pray for him and his co-workers daily, because I understand what they do. I mean, he got injured on the job because of what he was doing. He has faced it down, and you're talking about he patrols my home block. He patrols my hood. He patrols the hood that he knows well, and it's sad when he has to those encounters where he has to put himself first before the perp. And there's nothing wrong with that, but he has to do that, and it's a scary thing when I think about that. And when we share, and he shares with me what he experiences, it's a scary thought. But we cannot just use the Black Lives Matter mantra or movement when it comes just to acts of aggression from law enforcement. We have to use that same mantra and that same movement within the full spectrum of our existence. That includes church life. We got to say Black Lives Matter when it comes to church life and get rid of these preachers and things that are exploiting our people. You know, that's just the reality. They are exploiting our people. They want to building bigger buildings, and that's noble. I ain't hating on them. They want to have greater ministries, and that's noble. I ain't hating on them. But when it's done at the expense of persons of color who are embraced in poverty and things of that nature, we ought to say, hey, Black Lives Matter when it comes to this. Your church ain't paying no taxes. You know, what are you doing for outreach? If you are doing outreach, okay, how's it really helping economic development? You know, how are you providing jobs? And I ain't just talking about for your members. How are you doing that? How can you as a church help create jobs in our community? You know, can you get those brothers who coming out and re-entering the community, get them into college where they can be barbers if they didn't have a skill, get them into some type of skill, train, and let them go back into our community, open their own businesses, and we support them. All right, yeah, man. And what about, if somebody is hustling on the side and they slanging. How about getting them trained as an entrepreneur so they can become legitimate? So if weed is ever if weed is ever made federally made legal at the federal level, they can open a business. They can be legit. They can they can slang that purple. I don't even know what I'm saying. Well, but you know what I'm saying? That's a spectrum of Black Lives Matter. You can say, okay, man, you got these skills. Let's get you trained. Let's set up this think tank, this business think tank. Let's see what skill set do you have that can be a viable business, not just an idea. All right, so you want a studio. Okay, what can you do other than rap? Okay, we got enough rappers. What can you do? You want to open a studio? How about open a studio and encouraging those students who are taking classical music, those who are in orchestra, yeah, and encourage them to learn Brahms, encourage them to learn Beethoven, and encourage them to say, okay, I want to record you. I want to make an album with you playing Bach. Play the concertos of Bach. I want to record you playing the Brandenburg concertos, all of them, and that's where we go. But that's gonna be your hustle. You can't rap, all right? Fine. Okay, good. This is what you're gonna do. We're gonna get you a talent. You can play. You can play this, all right? Good. How about franchising? We get together and say, okay, churches, all right. We know that there's a food desert in this area. Let's pool our funds together and let's open a franchise, not of a McDonald's and not of anything like that, but let's open a franchise. Let's open a Panera Bread in South, like in South Jackson. Let's make it viable. I like what there's a church here, New Horizon, and Bishop Ronnie Crudup and his son Ronnie Crudup Judah. I gotta commend them for what they're doing in this area here in South Jackson. They're really revitalizing by inviting people to come in and live there. But they taking leadership. Not just him, there are many others. He was just came on top of my head. But pulling together, I remember there was a church, a group of churches that started a federal credit union, and it maybe I think churches here helped start Hope Credit Union here. I may be mistaken, but again, pulling our resources together as a community, if we're going to really say Black Lives Matter and say, okay, we're going to engage our community by promoting things that are healthy for them, financially healthy. We're still working on getting, more private schools, more Black centered, church centered private schools. Yeah. Uh-huh. Say hello. Say hello. Yeah, what he said. And we don't have to wait for an agency to start a charter school if it's available. We that's the kind of stuff we can do, and we ain't got to buy into the rhetoric or the narrative that said black charter schools or black private schools are gonna hurt public schools. No, let them empower public. Let them be used to work with public schools. We know our public schools are failing. We shouldn't keep our children in failing public schools. Yeah, we can be empowered to say, okay, let the public schools fail, but we're not going to let our children fail. Yeah, accountability. Thank you, Chelsea. You're right. Accountability is what we have to do. Huh? Say. Yeah, what he said. It's just too adorable, I tell you. All right, all right, all right. So I've ranted long enough. But I do want to say this as I wrap up, that I believe Black Lives Matter. I have no political connotations to that. Within the full spectrum of our existence as Black people, we need to know we matter. We need to know how empowered we can be beyond just a mantra, beyond just a protest, beyond just a march, beyond just seeing and politicizing things. We need to get out of that because they're going to play us against each other. They're going to play us against one side. You're Democrat, they're going to play you. If you're Black Democrat, they're going to play you against a Black Republican. If you're Black Republican, they're going to play you against a Black Democrat. We ain't no doggone pawns, and we should be tired of being used as such. We must do for us what others will not do for us. Beginning with education, beginning with spirituality in the church, and moving to the broader spectrum of our political power. Malcolm, Martin, they ain't died for nothing. Shuttlesworth, they ain't died for nothing. Many others, they didn't die. They did not put their lives on the line. They understood greater than we do. Black Lives Matter. They didn't have to say it. They became it. They realized Black Lives Matter because they put their lives on the front lines all the time. We can't exploit ourselves through the process. You can't, yeah, we can't exploit, and I can't say that enough. We got to be tired of self-exploitation. I we talk about the black exploitation films, black exploitation films, and how in the 70s they were good and all of that. But the reality is we exploit ourselves more now as church folk, as teachers, as all we do it. And we do more harm to ourselves. And white folk do the same thing. It's just that it's a great amount of them. So the ripple effect of what they do to their community isn't as great as it is with us. We when it hurts us, it hurts us. It can go through generations before we able to get over it. Anyway, I've run out of time, man. I didn't talk. Y'all let me ramble. I appreciate it. Hey, if you're in the Jackson, Mississippi area on July the 29th, I want to take this time to invite you to come to the Laborers of Vineyard Gospel Choir, singing with that choir. Darius Mott used to sing with that choir. Putting him on blast again. He ain't even on it, but anyway. But we'll be having our annual anniversary concert, 32 years. And that'll be Sunday, July 29th at 5 o'clock at my church, New Bethel. If you're in the Jackson area, you're welcome to come. If you're not in the Jackson area, you're welcome to send some money. No. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. Listen, you can support me. I have a Patreon page, and you can go. I'll give you the information for that. But you can support me on Patreon. You can support me to keep this broadcast alive. Uh, Darius coming to do a solo. All righty then, because we sure need some soloists. But you can support me. PayPal, all of that information is there. Go to my webpage, Lorenzo T. Neal. I ain't updated it yet, but you can read some articles and catch out. You can see how you can support me there. Um, However you do it, I appreciate it. Tune in. Every episode we do is broadcast. Sometimes it's archived. Sometimes it's broadcast live, like today. But you can catch up any on those. Zera Today, blogtalkradio.com/Zera Today, or the Zera Network Facebook page. And available on iTunes and all the other podcasts, your favorite podcasts. You can download them. Zera Today. Thank you for support. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I have my hands full, as you can see. I have my hands full. These guys, there's a dog and there's a 3-year-old. And that's about all I can say about that. But anyway, let me get out of here. You guys have a great day. And tune in next week if I do this. I'm trying to get serious. Appreciate it. Thank you for all who tuned in. Thank you for all the comments. Like the page, subscribe to the show, follow me, all that good stuff. I'm learning. Y'all take care, guys. Bless you.